So today we want to talk about the impact of home improvements on your home before you sell it. So Tori, you want to just take it from here?
Yeah, I think that this topic is actually more relevant than it ever has been. Over the last couple of years, the cost of goods has gone up pretty significantly and labor as well. And so, from the perspective of a buyer, when you're selling a home that does need some work, whether it's modernization or actual repairs, it's a big factor in calculation for them. And it's interesting what it does to the psychology of buyers. It of course depends on the buyer, but yeah, you really have to be mindful about what we're presenting.
Yeah. Yeah, because certain things like if you've got a house in pretty original condition, the thing that I've always said is like, look for grandma's house because a lot of times that's the one that, it's dated, but it's in pretty good shape. There might be newer windows, there could be a newer roof and furnace and, the bigger stuff that,
Hmm.
people don't really notice that sometimes though. When they're
Hmm.
looking at a house, they
Hmm.
see it and they're
Hmm.
like, well, this needs a lot
Well,
of
it's not the
work.
fun stuff. Yeah,
Exactly, exactly.
yeah.
So understanding what the fun stuff is versus the expensive stuff is super important if you're a buyer and kind of if you're a seller. But it's
Hmm.
definitely, like you just mentioned, there's definitely two different perspectives. Because from the seller side, like you're trying to maximize, your return on investment if you're going to do a bunch of repairs before you list it. Like you want to make sure that those actually make you money. Um,
Right.
right. So and then but then also like how do you do stuff that's going to make it more marketable as opposed to just putting a house on the market in the current condition. But because a lot of times you want people to do less work though than maybe they like the seller. If you're going to list someone's house,
Yes.
a lot of times you encourage them to do a little bit less work than maybe they even expected. Is that
Yeah.
true? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It just depends. Like, people ask us this a lot, what do we need to do to get it ready? And we're probably not going to suggest that you remodel the kitchen or the bathroom, Um, you're not going to get your return on investment and you might do something that the buyer doesn't like. And so again, we're not going to suggest, massive remodels or anything like that. It's typically glaring repairs and then little things that can freshen up the look of the home, which tends to be paint, trim, and flooring, depending on the flooring,
Yep.
right?
Sure.
So, like our example right now is we had this listing that it's original. It's 1968 and it's original. Um, and the carpets were dark brown and the walls were, I think, maroon, right? And so when you walked in, it just had this really dark feel to it. And then big, curtains. I'm forgetting what they're called, but the really, really big curtains that are kind of dated at this point. And it's a very nice home. I mean, it's got a newer roof, it's got a newer furnace, newer air conditioning unit. They just did the vapor barrier and the crawl space and a new sump pump. So again, the unsexy things have happened. It's in really, really good shape. But when you walked in, it just kind of had this dark feeling to it that didn't, add any value, right? And so
Hmm.
the sellers were open to doing carpet and paint, and they did. And it has made a mass. And then we staged the home, of course. And it was just a massive difference. And it actually showed the listing to some of the family members of the home, and they didn't even recognize. They were like,
Yeah.
"What are you showing me?" And I was like, "This is the
You
house."
don't you don't remember
Like
the
you're that
house?
different.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
just carpet and paint. That was
And how
it.
much does something like that
Um,
cost? Like, do you
that
ballpark? Yeah.
this was I think for everything was 15,000. So it
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily cheap, but it's also allowed them to list $25,000 higher than we were expecting. And now we're getting potentially multiple offers in. And
Yeah.
again, I don't
Super
think that would have
competitive.
happened if it was the other way
Exactly.
around, and then it's interesting. So this is actually even more positive feedback on this scenario, which was we had open houses this weekend and we met a neighbor, and the neighbor actually had the house listed, And he came in and I talked to him for a while and then ended up, having a meeting with him later. But he just said, I saw that house when it had the estate sale. I went into it and then I saw that there was contractors there and then I saw it get listed and I went to your open house and I couldn't believe how different it was.
Yeah.
And the difference with his house is it was a similar thing. Everything was original,
Yeah.
1969, and including yellow shag carpet. And I said, it's interesting. Like obviously that kitchen could be modernized, and obviously those bathrooms could be modernized, but and the carpets and the paint and all that kind of stuff. But I'm only going to suggest carpet and paint in this scenario because the psychology of the buyer is really interesting. If they walk in and you have dark walls and dark carpets and dated kitchen and dated bathroom, it just feels overwhelming. And not to
Yeah.
mention there's probably an odor because you've got older carpets, right?
Yeah.
So if you remove just a little bit of that, so again, take out carpets and do some fresh paint, then it has a fresh feel to it, not only in looks, but in the smell as well, right? And then they walk in and they think, okay, yeah, it's a little dated, but we can just do this, we can just do this. And the
Yeah.
psychology completely changes. And you get a significant amount higher if you just do some minor tweaks.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah, I would say that's like incredibly important in certain neighborhoods too. Like that
yeah,
house that you're talking about is in
yeah,
a nicer
yeah,
is it's in a nicer neighborhood. So a lot of the homes, that haven't sold maybe are in the same shape, but the ones that have
yeah,
sold a lot of times have been
yeah,
updated and that's why they're fetching, that premium price. So it's
for
hard,
sure.
if you're selling something that's kind of unique in like a dated way. We also don't
Hmm.
have great comps for that. But like everything you're saying, like it's not as marketable. People don't like fall in love with like the location as much if they're distracted by the little things. And so
Hmm.
kind of just having people focus on the location and the house itself is kind of what we're trying to do, with a
Hmm.
listing. It's like
Hmm.
why does
Yeah.
someone want to move here, right? They want to move here
Hmm.
because they can maybe personalize it.
Hmm.
They can personalize it and they don't have to right away if they don't need to or if they don't want to.
Right.
Like they can take their time
Right.
doing that, because some other
Hmm.
houses it's like the big question is like where do you start and where do you stop when you're doing any type of
Yeah.
remodeling?
That
And
is hard.
so,
Yeah.
but like you said, the rule of thumb is kind of like the unsexy stuff is always a good thing to keep an eye on, pay attention to. But then carpet and paint, or flooring
Yeah.
and paint, we should say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Windows, like windows, you said glaring issues earlier, and that's a big thing. Is like, a weird way to walk around a house. I was just not talking to someone the other day, listing I went on, and the house was really clean. Like if
Hmm.
you looked at it from a distance, it looked really nice. But if you put your head down and kind of looked at the floors, like you'd see it's like dirty. The trim's really dirty. Everything's just really dirty in
Hmm.
there. And it's interesting.
Yeah.
Like if you walk in your house, that's not how you walk around. Like if you're just walking around, you're not looking at little things. But if you're a buyer, you're paying really close attention to little things
Yeah.
like that. And
Yeah.
so if we can fix the flooring and we can repaint it, like now we're just getting people back to thinking about the home, and
Hmm.
the location
Hmm.
and maybe the
Yeah.
schools and
Well,
that kind of stuff.
well, and it's funny. I hear this all the time, and it makes sense. But it's well, why would I do something if the buyer's just going to rip it out anyway, or if it's
Hmm.
something that they don't like, which is absolutely relevant. But at the
Hmm.
same time, like I said, if they walk in and you've got yellow shag carpets and a dated kitchen and all that kind of stuff, it just seems overwhelming. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting. The logic doesn't make any sense at all, but it is the reality of the psychology of it. It's just you just got to freshen it up. It's simple. And I don't think we can stress how much odor is a thing. You know what I mean? People don't realize
Yeah.
how much that can turn people away.
Yeah. No, yeah, there is kind of a certain standard you have to have if you're listing a house. I mean, you can obviously
Hmm.
list any house in any condition at any point,
Right, of
but
course.
but if you've got like the worst house on the block, for example, maybe it was a smoker in there and it hasn't been maintained and all that stuff, like those are the ones that typically sell off market. But if you're going to go on market, like even just like a smoker's house, like to paint it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
if you're not
yeah.
going to do anything else, we gotta address that. It's yeah, the
Hmm.
odors, the
Hmm.
odors are because yeah, there's some of the smells you go into certain houses,
Yeah.
of which we've
Well, it's
sold some
funny.
of those,
Even
but
like, yeah, of course. It's interesting. I mean, we even showed houses that are owner occupied, and it's not in bad shape. In fact, it's in good shape. But they've got a crock pot going. which is
Yeah.
cooking for 12 hours. It's like even that, which is not relevant to the house at all, it has this weird psychological thing that happens. It's like, oh, it feels muggy in here. Like, I don't
Or it feels
know.
like it's kind
Yeah.
of like why you remove personal like pictures, because now it feels
Yeah.
like it's someone else's home. If they're
Yep.
cooking a dinner, it's their home. It's not your home. You
Yes.
know,
Exactly.
uh,
Hmm.
like it's a lot easier to sell a vacant house just because, again, you're selling the home. We're not selling someone else's personal property in the home. So
Right.
if it doesn't have
And
any
it's
of that,
distracting in photos.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's
Sorry,
a
go on.
big thing about staging. Like
Hmm.
staging is staging actually set up how you would live in it, but it is
Hmm.
set up the best way like it looks. It makes the
Hmm.
spaces feel bigger, like you could understand the spaces and the various uses of them, but it might not be how normal people actually live in it. But it's important because
Hmm.
again, we want people to focus on the house,
Well, yeah,
not
and also
yeah.
I hear a lot like, well, can't people just see past that? No, they can't.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how many times
yeah.
I've been, looking through listings. Sometimes, oh, I don't want to see that one, and I'm like, well, hang on, why? And it's like, well, look at all that stuff. And it's like that'll be gone, And I know it's silly, but
Yeah.
it's just what happens. It's if there's a bunch of heavy, dark furniture, it's going to make it look small, but we need to get it out of there. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers on this, but like, what would you guess? Like, sellers, when they're getting ready to sell a house, like, most people put things in boxes and they put it in the garage, and like, the
Hmm.
garage ends up being full. But like,
Yeah,
everybody can see past the garage. That's like the only thing I feel like in a
it's
house
true.
that they can see
That's
past.
true. That's
So
funny.
if you're
Yeah.
gonna move stuff,
Yeah.
like, just box it up, yeah, declutter
Yes.
things, and just throw it in the
Hmm.
garage. Like, yeah, you're gonna have to park
Exactly.
on the driveway or the street for a little bit, but if you
Right.
have a garage,
Right.
it's like, yeah.
That's a good
But
point. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I guess the moral of the story here, if I look back over my notes, is like one thing we didn't actually talk about was energy efficient upgrades. That's kind of I would say that's a hit or miss one. Like new windows, for example. I've had
Hmm.
people ask about new windows. It's like probably new windows aren't necessary when you're selling a home. Like it definitely is going to be a feature, but I don't think buyers, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think buyers actually understand how much windows cost. Um, so, if they see a few bad windows and they're like, oh, we can just replace
Hmm.
the windows. Like, I think
Hmm.
that's the reason you don't typically do things like windows. Furnace and
Hmm.
hot water heater, if they're old, like I think that can be a decent, you know, decent thing. Like, and I'm talking like 20 to 30-year old furnace, you know.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
and we already touched on the deferred maintenance side, but like, roof. Roof is a big one to me. You don't want, even if you've got an old roof, I feel like one of the
Hmm.
things you can do to kind of spruce that up is just get the moss treatment done at
Oh my
least
gosh,
at a
the moth.
minimum.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know. It's
because
very simple. Yeah.
yeah,
Because
that's
people don't know what they're
simple.
doing, think that means a leak or something. It just doesn't. We live in a wet area, moss gets on roofs, we just need
Yep,
to remove it. And so,
yep,
yeah, if you just keep that objection out of the buyer's mind,
yeah,
that's huge. And it's,
yeah,
$500 or something like that.
yeah.
It's not the end of the
And
world.
then
So,
I got
yeah.
curb appeal on here. That's another just really simple, easy one. Like
Yep.
that's not
Power
just trimming
washing,
your power
landscaping.
washing.
Yeah.
Yeah, light landscaping. Yeah, but I guess anything else you already mentioned. The kitchens and the bathrooms are always definitely not the one that's gonna, because the other problem with doing a kitchen, for example, is now you got to do the bathrooms. Like I remember like you watch those HGTV shows and like sometimes they'll
Hmm.
just update the kitchen and then the episode will be over. I'm like, but what would they do with the bathroom? Or what do they do with
Yeah.
the rest of
Yeah.
the house? They stop at
Yeah.
the kitchen.
Yeah.
Like that's if you
Yeah.
live there, that's totally fine. But if you're selling
Yeah.
it,
Hmm.
it's hard to just do one thing and not the rest of it. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
and how many houses have you showed where they only had the budget to do the kitchen, and then they do the bathroom 6 years later and they're totally different styles?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
interesting too.
The
But
different
anyway, that's
eras
a different
throughout the
topic.
whole house. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
that's why at the
Yeah.
end of the day it is pretty simple, but it's like picking the things that are gonna be just just yeah, freshen it up. I think that's really
Yep.
all
And
we're
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And every situation's different. And
Hmm.
talking about those variables with you is really important because, again, everyone is different. Every situation is different. And we can
Yeah.
sell a house in any way, but we might make suggestions here and there based on what we see.
Yes, exactly. Because this
Yeah.
could go on forever. Because you're right. There's not really exactly a system for it, um,
No.
but you kind of
Mm-mm.
know. The idea is just make it
Yeah.
feel like it could be the buyer's next, their dream home. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Good enough.
Cool. All right.
All right.
Thanks.
All right.
I'll
See
see
ya.
you on the next one.
All right. See you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.